Don't eat that cake, sir, please. Put the fork down. There's something wrong with it. Elliot Bancroft held the silver dessert fork halfway to his mouth, the first slice of a three-tiered vanilla buttercream cake glistening under the warm light of the Rosewood Grand's private dining hall. 200 guests filled the room behind him, their applause still fading from the toast his oldest friend had just delivered. It was his 65th birthday. The end of an era, Fiona had called it when she insisted on planning every detail, the beginning of legacy. Across the room, near the narrow corridor that connected the kitchen to the service pantry, Lorraine Osei stopped walking. The tray of champagne flute she carried tilted dangerously in her hands. Her daughter was standing in front of the head table, both palms raised toward the most powerful man in the room, and every word she had just spoken was still hanging in the air like smoke from a blown-out candle. "Zara," Lorraine whispered, already moving. Come here, right now." But Zara did not move. She stood with her shoulders squared, a 9-year-old girl in a second-hand dress her mother had ironed twice that morning. And she looked directly at Elliot Bancroft with the kind of certainty that made grown men uncomfortable. "She put something in it," Zara said. "I watched her do it." At the far end of the head table, Fiona Merritt set down her champagne glass with a slow, deliberate motion. She wore a silver gown that caught every light in the room. Her auburn hair swept into a careful twist, emerald earrings that Elliot had given her 10 years ago for their 20th anniversary as partners. She had been smiling all evening with the polished warmth of a woman who had spent 25 years learning how to be indispensable. Now the smile stayed, but something behind it shifted, the way a lake freezes from beneath while the surface still looks like water. "I'm sorry," Fiona said, her voice pitched perfectly between amusement and concern. "Sweetheart, what did you just say?" Lorraine reached Zara and put both hands on her shoulders. "Mr. Bancroft, Ms. Merritt, I am so sorry. She was supposed to be in the kitchen watching her tablet. She must have wandered out. I don't know what she thinks she saw." "I don't think," Zara said. "I saw." A murmur moved through the nearest tables. 200 guests at the Rosewood Grand, every one of them hand-picked. Bay Street executives, old university friends, 3 members of parliament who had known Elliot since his first development deal in Scarborough 40 years ago. No press, no cameras, just trust and a birthday cake baked by the most expensive patisserie in Toronto. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband. "Whose child is that?" "The caterer's daughter, I think. Good Lord. On a night like this?" Fiona pressed one hand flat against her collarbone, the gesture of a woman absorbing an insult with grace. "Zara, darling, I understand you have a big imagination. But you cannot walk into a private celebration and accuse me of tampering with a birthday cake in front of Mr. Bancroft's guests. That is a very serious thing to say." "I know it's serious," Zara said. "That's why I'm saying it." Lorraine's grip tightened on her daughter's shoulders. Her voice dropped to a whisper, sharp enough to cut glass. "Baby, please. Not here. Not now." But Mama, she went into the kitchen when nobody was looking. She had a little bottle. She squeezed drops into the frosting on his piece, the one with the gold leaf. Then she smoothed it over with the back of a spoon. Silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that fills a room when 200 people suddenly realize they are holding their breath. Elliot set the fork down. He had not taken the bite. Fiona gave a short laugh, the kind designed to release pressure. "My God," she said, shaking her head with a smile that begged the room to find this absurd. "I went into the kitchen to check on the timing because I organized this entire evening. That is what a friend does when she has spent 4 months planning a celebration for a man she has worked beside for a quarter of a century. I spoke with the pastry chef. I confirmed the candle placement. I made sure the gold leaf piece went to the birthday boy, because I know Elliot and I know he would try to give himself the plain slice and give the decorated one to someone else." She looked around the table. "Is generosity now a crime?" Several guests chuckled. Relieved, grateful laughter. The kind people offer when they want the awkward moment to dissolve. A man near the center of the room muttered to his wife, "She's looking for attention. Kids do that at events like this." An older woman nodded. "Her mother works here. The girl probably feels left out." Zara heard it. Lorraine heard it. Neither of them flinched, but Lorraine's eyes went to the floor the way they always did when the world reminded her of the particular distance between serving the party and attending it. "I don't want attention," Zara said quietly. "I want him to not eat that cake." Elliot studied the girl. He was a man who had built Bancroft Capital from a single office above a Kensington Market fish shop into the largest private development firm in Ontario. He had survived 2 recessions, a hostile takeover attempt, a divorce that made the National Post, and a heart scare at 58 that had taught him the difference between people who visited him in the hospital and people who visited his office while he was gone. He knew what fear looked like. He knew what performance looked like, and he was not entirely sure which one he was seeing right now. Zara, he said carefully, look at me. She did. Her eyes were dark brown and absolutely still. Are you sure you didn't see Ms. Merritt adjusting the decoration? The pastry chef told me the gold leaf was delicate. Maybe she was fixing it. No, sir. She had a little brown bottle, like the ones at the pharmacy. She squeezed 4 drops. I counted. Then she put the bottle back in her clutch, the silver one with the clasp. It's on her chair right now. Every head at the table turned. The silver clutch sat on the seat of Fiona's chair, exactly where Zara said it would be. Fiona followed the gazes and then looked back at Elliot with an expression caught somewhere between exasperation and pain. Yes, Elliot, that is my bag. I have eye drops in it. I have breath mints. I have a lipstick and a tissue and a photograph of my late mother that I carry everywhere. Shall we empty it on the table in front of the deputy minister because a child has decided I am a poisoner? Another round of uncomfortable laughter. Zara did not laugh. Lorraine did not laugh. And in the back of the room, near the service entrance, a sous chef named Kwame, who had worked with Lorraine for 6 years, stood very still, because he had also seen Fiona Merritt in the kitchen 20 minutes ago, and he had thought it was strange that she closed the door behind her. Elliot picked up the fork again. Enough, he said, not unkindly. It's a piece of cake. Fiona has been my partner since before this girl was born. If she says she was adjusting the decoration, I believe her, Mr. Bancroft. Zara's voice cracked for the first time. Please. He looked at her once more. A 9-year-old in a pressed dress with a small beaded bracelet on her wrist that spelled Z-A-R-A in blue letters. She was not performing. She was not seeking applause. She was standing in front of 200 strangers who did not believe her, and she was shaking, and she had not moved. Fiona touched his arm. Elliot, don't let this ruin your night. You don't have to eat it now. We can set it aside. I don't want you to feel pressured. But the rhythm of her words pushed in the other direction. The way someone says you don't have to when they very much need you to. Elliot's older sister, Harriet Bancroft, had been watching from 3 seats down. At 71, Harriet had spent a lifetime teaching constitutional law at the University of Toronto and had developed an allergy to performance that made her useful in moments like this. She had not spoken yet. She had not needed to. But now she leaned forward slightly and said one word, wait. Elliot looked at her. Humor an old woman, Harriet said. Set the fork down. Let the kitchen bring you a fresh slice from the same cake. If the girl is wrong, you've lost 2 minutes. If she's right, you've lost nothing. Fiona's smile tightened, just for a breath, the way a rope pulls before it snaps. Harriet, that is absurd. You are indulging a fantasy. I am indulging caution, Harriet said. They are not the same thing. The room waited. Elliot looked at the gold-leafed slice, then at Zara, then at his sister. Then he put the fork down and pushed the plate 6 inches away from him. Bring me another piece, he said to the nearest server. Fiona exhaled through her nose. Fine, she waved a hand. Fine, bring a fresh slice. Test the old one. Feed it to the flowers. Do whatever makes everyone feel safe, so we can get back to celebrating a man I have loved like a brother for 25 years. The plate was removed. A fresh slice was brought. Elliot ate it without incident. The evening continued, though the warmth never fully returned. Guests danced. Speeches were given. Fiona delivered a second toast with a voice so steady and eyes so bright that several people at the far tables whispered to each other that the whole episode with the child had been ridiculous and that someone should speak to the caterer about supervision. Zara sat in the kitchen on an overturned milk crate with her tablet dark in her lap, her chin on her fists. Lorraine knelt beside her. Baby, are you sure about what you saw? Mama, I counted the drops. Lorraine closed her eyes. She had worked for the Rosewood Grand for 4 years. Had built a reputation for precise, invisible service, the kind of work that succeeded only when nobody noticed you. Tonight, her daughter had stood in the center of that invisibility and made herself the most visible person in the room. Okay, Lorraine said quietly. Okay. At midnight, after the last guests had gone and the staff were breaking down the tables, Harriet Bancroft walked into the kitchen. She found Lorraine wiping down a counter and Zara asleep on 2 chairs pushed together, her jacket folded under her head. Mrs. Ozzie, Harriet said. Lorraine straightened. Mrs. Bancroft, I apologize again for the disruption. Stop apologizing. Harriet's voice was not warm, but it was honest. Where is the plate? Ma'am, the gold leaf slice. The one that was taken away, where is it? Lorraine stared at her. I asked Kwame to wrap it and put it in the walk-in cooler. I didn't know what else to do. Good, Harriet said. Don't let anyone touch it. I am sending someone for it in the morning. By 10 a.m. the following day, the slice of cake was in a lab at Mount Sinai. By 4 p.m., a toxicology analyst named Dr. Yale Fenton called Harriet directly. Mrs. Bancroft, who was supposed to eat this? My brother. A pause. The frosting contains a compound called tetrodotoxin in a concentration high enough to cause respiratory failure within 30 minutes of his ingestion. It was introduced topically, likely by Dropper, and masked by the buttercream. If your brother had eaten the decorated portion, the one with the gold leaf, he would have experienced numbness in his lips and tongue within 5 minutes, followed by progressive paralysis of voluntary muscles. In a room full of people who had been drinking champagne, the initial symptoms would have looked like intoxication or a mild allergic reaction. By the time someone called 911, his diaphragm would have stopped working. Harriet sat down slowly. She was in her office at the university, surrounded by case law and constitutional histories, and the room had never felt smaller. "Miss Bancroft, are you there?" "Yeah, I'm here." This was not accidental contamination. Tetrodotoxin does not appear in vanilla buttercream by chance. Someone put it there. Harriet called Elliot. Then she called the Toronto Police Service. Then she sat with her hands folded on her desk and thought about a 9-year-old girl who had counted 4 drops. The investigation moved quickly because Harriet Bancroft did not believe in waiting and because she had spent 40 years learning that evidence left alone has a way of disappearing. By the following evening, detectives had obtained footage from the Rosewood Grand's kitchen cameras. The footage showed Fiona Merritt entering the kitchen alone at 7:22 p.m., closing the door behind her, crossing directly to the plated desserts arranged for the head table, removing a small amber bottle from her clutch, applying 4 drops to the gold leaf slice, smoothing the frosting with the back of a dessert spoon, and leaving the kitchen at 7:25 p.m. 3 minutes. 25 years of friendships spent in 3 minutes. Elliot watched the footage in his study at the house in Rosedale. The room was paneled in dark walnut, lined with first editions he had collected since his 20s, and it still smelled faintly of the single malt he and Fiona had shared 2 weeks ago when she came to review the quarterly numbers. She had sat in the leather chair by the window. She had laughed at something he said about retirement. She had poured him a second glass. And now he watched her on a screen, bending over his birthday cake with a brown bottle in her hand and an expression on her face he had never seen before. Focused, unhurried, and completely empty of the warmth she had worn like a second skin for a quarter of a century. "Pause it," he said. The detective paused the footage. "Can you show me the part where she leaves?" The footage advanced. Fiona stepped out of the kitchen, and in the corridor she passed a man in a server's jacket who was not on the staff list. She handed him a folded envelope without breaking stride. He took it with his left hand, turned, and exited through the loading dock. "Do you know him?" the detective asked. "No. His name on the roster was listed as Craig Howell. The staffing agency has no record of a Craig Howell. The signature was forged." Elliot leaned back in his chair. The bandage was not on his hand this time. The poison had not touched him. A 9-year-old girl had stood between him and that cake, and the distance between his life and his death was the width of a child's voice in a room that did not want to hear it. "What else?" he asked. The detective opened a second folder. "Your office manager flagged something this morning. In the past 2 months, 7 documents were accessed from your private server using your credentials during hours when you were confirmed to be off-site. 3 of those documents relate to the Bancroft Capital Succession Plan. One is an amendment to the Emergency Governance Clause that would transfer temporary operational authority to your CFO in the event of your sudden incapacitation or death. Fiona drafted the original governance clause." Elliot said. "Yes, sir, and it appears she revised it. The revision removes the board vote requirement. Under the amended language, your CFO would assume full control immediately upon certification of your incapacity by any 2 physicians with no waiting period and no board approval." "Ah!" She wrote herself a shortcut. "Yes, sir." Harriet stood near the window with her arms crossed. "What was the play, then?" "He collapses at the party. It looks like a cardiac event or an allergic reaction. The autopsy, if there even is one, takes weeks. In the meantime, Fiona steps in as acting CEO under the amended clause. She controls the accounts, the board votes, the asset transfers, and the buyer?" Elliot asked quietly. The detective turned a page. "We pulled Ms. Merritt's travel records. She flew to Calgary 6 times in the past 4 months. Each trip, she met with representatives of West Glen Partners, a private equity group that has attempted to acquire Bancroft Capital twice. You declined both times." "I declined because the deal was predatory. They wanted the land portfolio at 40 cents on the dollar. Merritt's communications suggest she had agreed to the terms on your behalf, contingent on her having signing authority." Elliot closed his eyes. The room was very quiet. Somewhere downstairs, the housekeeper was running water. Outside, a cardinal sat on the iron railing of the balcony and watched the city with the particular indifference of a creature that owed nothing to anyone. "She was going to sell my company over my dead body," Elliot said. "Literally." Harriet did not speak for a moment. Then she said, "And she would have succeeded if Lorraine Osie's daughter hadn't been in that kitchen counting drops." Elliot opened his eyes. "Where is the girl?" "At home." Lorraine took the day off. She is terrified she's going to lose her job. Call her. Tell her to bring Zara to the house. Elliot, it's 9 o'clock at night. I know what time it is, Harriet. Call her. Lorraine arrived at the Rosedale house 40 minutes later with Zara asleep in the back seat of a 12-year-old Corolla that needed new brakes. Zara woke up when the car stopped and looked at the house through the window with the wide, careful eyes of a child who understood she was in a place that was not built for people like her. Mama, why are we here? Mr. Bancroft wants to see you. Did I do something wrong? No, baby. You did something right. They were shown into the study. Elliot sat in his chair with the reading lamp on and the rest of the room in soft shadow. Harriet stood near the desk. The detective had gone, but the folder remained. Zara walked in holding her mother's hand. She looked at Elliot. He looked at her. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the silence held the weight of everything that had almost happened and everything that had not. Zara, Elliot said. Yes, sir. You told me not to eat the cake. Yes, sir. And I almost didn't listen. Zara thought about this the way she thought about everything, slowly, seriously, turning it over like a stone she had found in a riverbed. You did listen, she said. At the end is almost too late, but it wasn't. He looked at her for a long time. No, he said, it wasn't, because of you. Lorraine stood behind her daughter with her hands clasped, her eyes bright, her jaw tight with the effort of not crying in a room full of walnut paneling and first editions. Mrs. Osei, Elliot said, Sir, your daughter tried to save my life in a room full of people who told her to sit down and be quiet. She did not sit down. She did not become quiet. Every adult in that room, including me, failed her. I want you to know that I understand that. Lorraine pressed her lips together and nodded once. I also want you to know that you raised a child who counts drops. A sound escaped Lorraine's throat. Not quite a laugh, not quite a cry. Something between the two that only mothers of brave children understand. The front door opened downstairs. Footsteps in the hallway. Then a voice, familiar and composed, carrying the particular music of a woman who had spent 25 years learning the acoustics of this house. Elliot? Harriet told me you were home. I came as soon as I heard about the lab results. My God, Elliot, who would do this? I've been sick all day. I called 3 times and nobody answered. I thought something had happened to you. I thought. Fiona Merritt appeared in the doorway of the study. She wore a camel coat and no makeup. And she looked smaller than she had at the party, as though the silver gown had been a kind of architecture for her. And without it, she was just a woman standing in a doorframe trying to read the room. She saw Lorraine. She saw Zara. She saw the folder on the desk. Why is the caterer here? She asked. Her voice was still steady, but the question came half a beat too fast. Sit down, Fiona, Elliot said. I'd rather stand. Sit down. She sat. The camel coat pooled around her in the leather chair by the window, the same chair where she had laughed with him 2 weeks ago. She crossed her legs. She folded her hands. She looked at him with the particular tenderness of a woman who had practiced tenderness until it was indistinguishable from the real thing. Elliot, talk to me. What did the lab find? Tetrodotoxin. A pause. Perfectly timed. My God. In the cake? In my piece. The gold leaf slice. The one you insisted I eat first. The one I. She pressed a hand to her mouth. Elliot, you cannot think I had anything to do with this. I planned that party. I chose the patisserie. I personally tasted the menu in advance. If someone contaminated the cake, it happened in the kitchen, and I want answers as much as you do. The kitchen cameras show you entering alone at 7:22, Harriet said from near the desk. You closed the door, you crossed to the head table desserts. You removed an amber bottle from your clutch. You applied 4 drops to the gold leaf slice. You smoothed the frosting. You left at 7:25. Fiona stared at Harriet. Then she turned to Elliot. That is not what happened. We watched the footage. Fiona, the footage is wrong. Or it's been altered. Someone is setting me up. Please, you know me. You have known me since I was 29 years old and too scared to pitch my first deal. I have sat in this room with through your divorce, your heart surgery, your mother's funeral. I held your hand when the doctor told you about the blockage. I drove you home from the hospital. I made you soup, for God's sake. You also revised the emergency governance clause, Elliot said. You removed the board vote requirement. You gave yourself immediate signing authority in the event of my death. Something moved behind Fiona's eyes. Not guilt, not yet. Calculation. The rapid, invisible arithmetic of a woman determining which doors were still open. That was administrative. The board discussed streamlining the succession process months ago. I simply drafted the language. The board has no record of that discussion. It was informal. Over dinner. Marcus Chen and I. Marcus Chen left the board in January, Fiona. He has been in Vancouver for 5 months. The room went very quiet. Zara stood beside her mother, watching. She had not spoken since Fiona entered. She did not look afraid. She did not look triumphant. She looked like a child who had already said everything she needed to say and was now watching the adults arrive, slowly and painfully, at the place she had been standing all along. Fiona turned to Zara. The look she gave the girl was strange, almost admiring, the way a chess player looks at the piece that ended the game. "You were in the kitchen," Fiona said. "Yes, ma'am. Behind the shelving unit. Yes, ma'am. How did you know it was poison and not flavoring or food coloring?" Zara considered this. "Because you looked at the door before you did it, and you didn't taste it. My mama always tastes everything before it goes out. You didn't taste it. You just squeezed it on and wiped it smooth and left." Fiona closed her eyes. When she opened them, the performance had not quite ended, but it was fraying at the seams, the way expensive fabric comes apart not in a tear but in a slow unraveling of threads. "Elliot," she said softly, "you are going to destroy 25 years over 4 drops in a child's story." "No," Elliot said. "You destroyed 25 years in 3 minutes in a kitchen." 2 plainclothes officers stepped through the study door. They had been waiting in the hallway. They were calm. They were quiet. One of them held a warrant. Fiona looked at the warrant, then at Elliot. Her composure held, but her hands, folded in her lap, were trembling. "I stood beside you," she said. "For 25 years, I stood beside you." "You stood beside my signature," Elliot said. "You stood beside my access. You stood beside my trust. You never stood beside me." She rose. The officers flanked her. At the doorway, she paused and looked back, not at Elliot, not at Harriet, but at Zara. "You are a remarkable child," she said. "Thank you, ma'am," Zara said. "But I'm not the one who did something wrong." Fiona left. The front door closed. A car started in the driveway and pulled away into the October night, and the house settled into the kind of silence that follows the departure of someone who will never return. Elliot sat in his chair for a long time. Lorraine stood near the doorway, one hand on Zara's shoulder, uncertain whether they should stay or go. "Mrs. O.C., Elliot said. "Yes, sir, what does Zara want to be when she grows up?" Lorraine blinked. "A veterinarian, sir. She wants to open a clinic for animals whose owners can't afford one." Elliot looked at Zara. "Is that true?" "Yes, sir. There's a cat on our street named Biscuit who needs surgery, but Mrs. Alvarez can't pay for it, so Biscuit just limps. I don't think animals should have to limp because people don't have enough money." Elliot's mouth moved in a way that might have been a smile if the evening had not already taken everything a smile required. "Come back on Saturday," he said. "Both of you. There are some things I'd like to discuss." On Saturday, Lorraine and Zara returned to the Rosedale house. The October light was thin and gold through the windows. The folder was gone from the desk. In its place was a single document, prepared by Elliot's personal attorney, establishing a trust in Zara's name. Education through veterinary school, fully funded. A modest house for Lorraine in the neighborhood of her choosing, when she was ready. A monthly stipend that, as Elliot put it, would not turn them into anyone they were not. "I spent 40 years accumulating money," Elliot told his sister later that afternoon, as they stood in the garden watching Zara chase a squirrel across the lawn with the uncomplicated joy of a child whose bravery had been recognized by the people who mattered. "This is the first time I've spent any of it on something that actually made me feel like I'd earned it." Harriet watched her brother, then watched Zara. "She saved your life, because she counts things," Harriet said. "She counts drops. She counts the way people look at doors. She counts the things adults have trained themselves to stop noticing. I know." "So, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to listen," Elliot said. "For the rest of my life, when a child tells me something, I'm going to listen." 3 months later, on a cold January morning, Fiona Merritt stood in a courtroom on University Avenue. The evidence was extensive: the kitchen footage, the amber bottle, recovered from her apartment with traces of tetrodotoxin still inside, the forged governance documents, the travel records to Calgary, the communications with West Glen Partners, the man in the server's jacket whose real name was Derek Van Leer, arrested at Pearson Airport with 2 additional vials of the toxins and a passport in a name that did not belong to him. He had cooperated. He had provided dates, dollar amounts, and the name of every meeting he had attended on Fiona's behalf. His cooperation was, in the Crown prosecutor's words, thorough. Fiona's lawyer argued diminished judgment. The court was not persuaded. Elliot did not attend the trial. He did not need to. He had already learned what the courtroom would confirm: that a woman he had trusted for 25 years had spent the last 2 of them quietly building a machine designed to convert his death into her profit, and that the only thing standing between that machine and its purpose had been a 9-year-old girl sitting on a milk crate behind a shelving unit, counting drops. On the afternoon the verdict was delivered, Elliot sat in his study with a new chess set on the table by the window. It was a simple wooden set, no gold leaf, no velvet lining, no antique provenance, just pieces and a board. Zara sat across from him, her blue beaded bracelet catching the winter light. Lorraine sat near the window with a cup of tea, watching them, still not entirely adjusted to the fact that her daughter now had a standing Saturday appointment to beat a billionaire at chess. "Your move," Elliot said. Zara slid her knight forward. "Check." Harriet appeared in the doorway, leaned against the frame, and shook her head. "You're letting her win." "I am not letting her win." "He's not," Zara said without looking up. "I'm winning." Outside the window, the long lawn lay quiet under a thin cover of snow, and somewhere across the city, in a courtroom that smelled of old wood and new consequences, a woman who had planned for every contingency was learning what it costs to underestimate a child who counts.